Hello everyone! As soon as my cast has calmed down and learned to behave, we'll be bringing them in. Here we go. Alright, they seem to be behaving. Yes! It never happens. So, we're here with another Tavern Talks. You've probably met both of our guests before. Um,
Never.
they'll
First
introduce
time.
themselves shortly. But the topic for today's Tavern Talks is about Session Zero, which is typically a sort of session or discussion that you have before starting a campaign or a one shot. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. You're more than welcome to post questions in chat and we'll hopefully get to them. There's also ferrets running around in the background in Nia's window, so that's what I'll be distracted by. Okay, so in case people haven't met you guys before, who are you? What do you do? Where can people find you? And maybe just a little about your experience with tabletop gaming. Fox, let's start with you today.
Oh, I started first last time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm so sorry. That's so awful. Please go ahead.
Oh, alright. Well, uh, I'm Fox. You can find me at Arcade Fox with a zero in Fox on Twitter. And I've played D&D for over 20 years slash other RPGs, so I'm the old one here, and I'm also hard of hearing. So great. You can find me here, and I do Tavern Talks, and I think I'm in a campaign coming up here. I
You
don't know the
think
title
you're
of
in a
it.
campaign?
Sorry, yes, I am in a campaign coming up. I don't know the title of said campaign, but it's coming up. And I haven't picked a character yet, so I have no idea. I'm also helping with disability rep over at Roll for Fun, and I'm doing shows on Featherfall Tabletop and other things that could be coming out on my Twitter. So check it, because
Awesome.
I don't even know anymore.
All right, Nia, what about you?
Hey everyone, I'm Near. I mean, you can pretty much find me on Polish's channel most of the time. Either I do Tavern Talks with her, or I'm in a fortnightly campaign on Fridays, my time, Saturdays, Australia time, because 16-hour time difference. I've been playing that campaign, the Night Parade, and then I am a backup for another campaign on Saturdays, my time, Sundays, their time, that boxes in with Polished. And yeah, you can also find me on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram if you want, at the Furret King, or in some cases Discord and a couple others, I think, near the Furret King. So yeah,
Awesome.
as you can also tell by the fact that there's something running under my bed right now. They're just in the background over here, just running in my bed.
All right, awesome. So yeah, you'll be able to find both of these people on other projects on the channel as well. I'm Polished. This is my channel. If you found the channel, you found me. We do a lot of tabletop stuff, and I also do variety streaming. So on the channel at the moment, we've got a mostly fortnightly 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons campaign on Saturdays Australian time, which is the show that Nia mentioned. In February, we'll also be launching a slightly longer campaign, an 8-session campaign. Again, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. We've also got some other interesting stuff in the works. When I'm not here, you can also find me on Roll for Damage, where I play in one of their Call of Cthulhu games. In terms of role playing, I've been really actively playing like multiple campaigns a week for the last year, but I first dove into it 5 or 6 years ago, but didn't maintain it consistently throughout all of that time. I both play and GM, although when I GM, it is not Dungeons and Dragons. So, for today's topic, session 0. Firstly, how would you guys, if someone was like, hey, what's a session 0? What would your response be?
In general, I would explain to them that the session 0 is something that is beneficial to do before your first session to lay the ground rules for how the group is going to, what everybody's expectations are, how the game's going to play out, just common table rules, stuff like that.
So how I would describe it would just be like expectations, the dynamic of the group that you're gonna run, the story. It really comes down to like what everyone wants out of the game, essentially. And then there's like minor rules throughout it, like things that you go over that maybe people are uncomfortable with something, or people want something in particular out of the sessions. Just that kind of stuff. Just going over the basics and then getting actual characters set up and running.
Awesome. Yeah, I pretty much say the same thing, that it's a chance to have a way of getting to know everyone, especially if you haven't played together before. It's a chance to set expectations, outline, responsibilities, both for gameplay and for other interactions, such as if I can't be there for a session, what do I do to let people know? How often am I expected to be there? All of those, like, this is how it's going to work type questions. So there's a few different ways to have a session 0. There's not just one way to go about it. Sometimes you have the luxury of having everyone sit down, ideally at a real table, or, the way we're doing it now. And have the whole group and the DM there at once. Sometimes you might find that schedules are freaking difficult, and you may have to have it in separate groups, even just one-on-one with the GM. Should also mention that character creation can happen at session 0, but doesn't always do so.
Yeah.
So why do you guys think it's important to have a session 0? Because we're promoting it quite heavily.
I would say it's pretty important because, say, in online, most of the time you don't know everyone. So it's a way to get everyone comfortable with each other before you actually start playing anything. It's a good way to, get everyone to know each other, have them maybe, if they do make characters in that session 0, get them to get ideas of maybe rumors or things that they know of each other's characters, or, backstories that they didn't think they were going to do because they were going to work alone originally, and now they want to work together to make characters. It kind of lets players get a little bit more into, getting involved with each other, as well as working in their character into a story.
Yeah, a lot of, getting the group actually vibing together, and with talking with people and what their expectations are, you can find out really quickly if someone is or is not going to work in the group. For instance, if everybody's expecting to have this, really, roleplay heavy, we want to see our characters make it all the way through this adventure, and then you have someone who wants to be a murder hobo, well, they're obviously not going to fit, and therefore you can kind of, steer away from having all those types of, things that'll detract from your campaign in the actual campaign. So it just kind of highlights some of those things. Additionally, it gets out into the air anything, that may be frugal, or any special needs or circumstances that a player may, need to make you aware of. It's a good time to make it aware before the actual campaign has been started.
So, very often we associate session 0s with a new campaign being launched. Everyone sits down, everyone has this discussion, but how do you approach it if you are joining an existing campaign or an existing group that have been playing together?
So usually from like existing campaigns that I've joined, it's a mixture, but like usually I'll do a one-on-one like the day like I get brought in, or like we'll do one-on-ones with some new player with a GM and that player. And then move into like a session 0 where we actually try and bring in other players. If we can't get the full group, at least get some of the people that I can. And that way everyone can kind of get to know each other, interact again, because I still want you to make sure that everyone works together. And that it doesn't ruin the flow of the already existing players as well.
Yeah.
And then from there, you know, you can continue on with like normal.
Yeah. I would definitely handle it with first a one-on-one with the DM for the DM to then describe like how the campaign has been running, what everybody's, you know, expectations from their session 0 was, bringing those up, and anything, information that needs to be highlighted to bring the new player in. But then additionally, I would also have at least Discord chat, or if you're, you know, having friends around a table, maybe do a board game night with that person beforehand or something to get them, one, comfortable with everybody at the table with them, but two, you know, they can, you know, have a side chat while you're gaming of like, oh, hey, you know, I'm coming in, you know, what characters are you guys playing? Are there any? And they can try and, you know, find ways to connect their character into the story without making it seem awkward, like, oh, well, we just picked up this person at a pub, and, you know, they're joining our group and we're going to go on. Like, that's always awkward. But if there's a sorry about that, I got something in my throat. If there's a reasoning why they're there, or they're being brought in, say, you know, you're going on a, you know, mission, and
we need a cleric, guys.
right.
Yeah.
But like, say, you know, you are going to something that is more of a religious site, and you don't have a cleric in your party, but maybe one of your characters knows someone, that may be a good tie-in to, you know, oh, hey, we can go visit someone that I know, and those two can have that connection, but it brings them into the party a lot better than, well, we just hired a cleric at a pub and it was fine, turned out great.
Or, you know, an example I can give, my very first campaign, when one of the players died, we brought a new character in, and our way of doing it was we met a random bard on the streets and asked them to just join our group.
I mean, it works.
It works until you feel bad because your characters all feel bad because she died the next session. So we picked a random person off the street, we're like, you're coming with us. And then immediately she died, and we're like, maybe we shouldn't have done that. So it's a good idea just to maybe work out what you're going to do before you just pick up random people on the side of the road.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of figuring out how to fit both a new character into the dynamic, but also a new player. And sometimes that takes a bit of figuring out. And I think that... Sorry?
Oh, and I was just going to also comment, giving that new player at least one, if not two people that they know, brings them into the RP without making it seem awkward. Because I know we had something in a previous campaign with Polish that was a little awkward, and conned it a couple times and we got it to work, but like it was one of those that like it just took an additional session 0 with all the players and talking about you know, where our story is, what we're doing, to really make that connection strong.
On that, I'd also add that I approach session 0 a bit differently if it's for a streamed game versus if it's for an at the table or, you know, off stream game. I prefer if preparing for something that's going to be, you know, visible to other people, that more work is done during session 0 to ensure that once the game is rolling, it runs smoothly.
Yeah.
At a normal, at your regular table, you might have a bit more time to work those things out. But it's not quite as entertaining to play the, hello, who are you? What are we doing here? How do I work with you guys? What's going on here? What's my job? All of those things.
It's like, even if you don't want a character who maybe
Foxes.
knows everyone,
Yeah.
maybe having them know the situation and having more information on that situation that the players are in currently.
Yep.
Like, in a game I joined, I knew more about what was going on than the actual players did. So it was a good way for me to tie in because I could tell them what was going on.
Yeah. I'm just gonna check something with the sound real quick. We're gonna go to the starting soon screen. We're all gonna be here, but just checking something.
Oh, no worries.
Need to raise your volume a little, Fox. That's pretty much it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's not you. Okay, there we go. Hopefully that's a bit better. Yeah, so I'd say again, it's especially if it's on stream, you do need a bit more time to iron out sort of the kinks and the whole thing. I think that again, it has to do a lot with the sort of pacing that you have for the campaign. If you're only together for like another 10 sessions, then you might want to, ensure that things get rolling. However, if it's a long-term campaign, we might be playing this game for 2 years, you can take a week or two to just literally get to know each other. And I think that's something that we don't really cover enough. It's like, how long, like, as a discussion in session 0, how long will it take for everything to be up and running in a sort of smooth machinery? What's the expectation for that?
Yeah. Even another point just to cover that, but it's like, as a person who's coming into a game, I want all the information I can beforehand. Because if you join a game and you don't know anything, it's going to immediately make you not want to play because everyone else has so much information and you don't have any.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're being useless because you can't help.
And I've had situations where I've joined a game and I've been expected to like lead a mission in some way or like give information about a mission, and I'm like, I know nothing about this homebrew world. I barely know who my character is. I don't know where I am. I don't know the tone of this world. How am I expected to be able to answer questions when I don't know myself? So that's also...
It's impossible to answer those, and you just have to look at the DM and be like, you answer, because you now play my character because I don't know what to say.
And I think that's also something that's worth discussing, like, if we're bringing you into the campaign in this capacity, do you feel you have enough information to be able to do that? How can we make it easier? So that's also something that's, especially if you're, doing a session 0, to join a pre-existing campaign. So, as a player during session 0, what are some questions that you like to ask to learn more about the game and all of these expectations? Perfect timing, by the way.
That was usually for me, questions I like to ask boil down to rules on character creation, limitations that maybe a DM has, homebrew rules, if they have any, the setting itself, if it's in like Faerun itself, is it in Forgotten Realms, or is it a homebrew world? The tone of the story that we're going to be playing in, is it going to be high fantasy, dark fantasy, is it modern, sci-fi, or whatever, like what story are we playing? An idea of the campaign or story that we are going to be playing, because not having any information to go on is really hard to create a character as well who fits into the story.
Yes.
Other questions that I would ask a DM. There's there's so many you could really ask. There's just so much to
Yeah.
ask because it's like, I don't know, like, especially like again we said, what happens with like if I miss a session? Like, should I, talk about like if I have to miss anything, what's my character going to be doing? Or in that sense of like, if this person misses a session and this person, all these people are here, does this character not get XP? Because I've been in games like that where people don't get experience or are sent off to do random things, so the characters don't have that character available. So things like that, I would ask that.
And I will say some of those questions, as far as at least setting and character creation limitations, if you are playing on Roll20, when you set up your campaign page, you can put that information in there, or even put a link to the Google Doc that has some of that information, so that they are coming into that session 0 with some information. But that is one way to handle some of those questions. You still may get some of those questions in your session 0 as a DM. But yeah, those are all good questions. The way I like to run it is like there will be questions, but like I like having just a broader discussion on when we get into that session 0 of like if someone really wants to play a race that I normally don't allow, but if they have a reasoning for wanting it and it's not going to break my game, I'm going to be like, yeah, sure. But I need, when you're asking these character creations, make sure to kind of have an idea of like, if you're asking for a certain race, why are you asking?
So we did write down a bit of a list during the pre-show. So one of the first things that was on my mind especially is like, what is the tone of this campaign? Again, like, are we doing all out bumbling chaos? Are we a bit more serious? Is it going to be a light-hearted campaign but with a lot of role play? Is it going to be like pirate themed? Because that was a little while ago, everyone was doing pirate stuff. Like, literally every game I looked into joining was like, so we're doing Saltmarsh. And
we're doing Pirates of the Seven Seas, and I'm just like, what the hell? Oh god.
Yeah.
More sea aquatic campaigns. No.
More
snow. Aquatic campaigns are not fun, guys. I'm sorry. I just don't find them fun.
So even just a basic, like, almost like, what genre am I getting myself into? And I'd say, like, already with this question, you can figure out whether it's going to be a good campaign for you or not. Like, I know that while I like occasional one-shots that are, like, chaotic and humorous and all of that, a whole campaign that is designed to be very, very chaotic, where it's, this sort of almost slapstick approach or chaotic stupid, I know that I'm not going to have a good time. I like to mix my fun with my serious stuff. If I'm going to be invested for a longer period of time.
I like a good role play that's comedy but also serious when it needs to be.
Yeah.
I think I'm in agreement there. You can't have it, for me at least, can't have it all be very serious, or like, each session kind of takes a little bit of a toll. But having those lighthearted moments in there really brings the campaign together for me.
Yeah.
Things that I also avoid is, types of players like murder hobos. I just can't. I can't deal with them. You are going to ruin every single plan of mine, and I'm just not. Nope, that is not happening for me. And like you'll also want to ask, like, what is everybody wanting as far as role play to combat?
Yep,
It's
we're
a
getting to that.
question
It's
you're
on the
all-
list.
Oh,
You know, the one I
It is
sent you guys? And
Yeah,
asked you to
it's
read
just-
through and add to.
Yeah.
Don't worry,
it's-
we're totally covering everything all at once.
Yeah, it's just further down on the list than I wanted, okay?
Jeez,
I'm-
we'll get there, Fox.
Skipping from A to Z, you know?
So, yeah, again, like, I think that sort of goes a little bit in hand with the tone of the game. Like, is there going to be, like, at the very least, you'll know whether it's roleplay heavy or whether it's like a dungeon crawler where there's going to be, you know, more combat. I think that's to some extent included in the tone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because it's very rare that you go like, oh yeah, we're going to have a super hardcore dungeon crawler to push like mechanical abilities to the maximum, and to then go, oh, what do you mean you expected there to be a heavy roleplay ratio in this?
Mhm.
I'd say some of the other things we've touched on, like Nia, you mentioned it a bit during your opening, is the world itself. Like, is it a pre-existing one? Is it a homebrew? But also, is it like, because often GMs add their own flavor to the world. It's a bit more like, okay, you can run it in the Forgotten Realms, but it's a whole lot darker than the official material.
Mhm.
I think a lot of those things are worth covering here. For example, if you've added that, I don't know, dwarves are discriminated against, that's also a good thing to mention. Or that magic is heavily frowned upon.
Mhm.
This is like where you mentioned that, like when discussing, okay, what's the tone and the world that we're going to be in?
Yeah.
Yep.
Or maybe like the ley lines here are stronger in an area, or things like that. It's just like things that maybe you added into your world that it's good to know, just because the players might want to know that they live in a world they would know things about.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I wrote down like a trailer version of the campaign, like in a nutshell, pitch me your campaign in a sentence or two.
Yeah.
Oh, the elevator pitch.
Yeah,
Make
give
feel
me a
like I
freaking
want
elevator
to-
pitch. Sell it to me, mate.
Yes. Like, a good way I could also say is like Roll20 lets you have a description, so it's like it's a good thing. But if you put a description in there, that's what catches my eye. The first thing I say, because I read descriptions. So if you have this, pitch about the world that we're in, the setting, I will more likely read that than, hey, need 2 to 4 players for campaign.
Yeah.
I don't know what the campaign is.
Yeah.
What is it?
And
Like, just try and sell me a little bit of something, so I can feel good about my game.
And I'd say, I think Roll20, people are pretty good at that. Like, at least ones who've figured out how to attract applications. I'd say that, because we've got a local Facebook group for this part of, well, there's a few of them. And people are often like, hey, we're looking for players for this location, this time. This is the system we're using, but not a whole lot about the campaign itself. So I'd say that's heavily sort of platform dependent, and
Yeah.
it's if they haven't provided it, make sure you ask, because people find weird things to run. Okay.
Well,
Look,
and like,
if you don't, you're gonna run into me, where I had a problem where I ran into a cave and I ran into My Little Pony characters. Literally, My Little Pony characters in D&D was just like,
Okay.
okay, I'm out. Bye.
yeah. It's the way I would say, if you want players to come into your game and be excited about the campaign, give them something to be excited about.
Yeah.
Like, give them just some nuggets of information to be excited about.
Yeah. And that's also drop in the entire story. Give me a snippet.
Yeah.
Like any trailer to a movie just has like this little brief synopsis of like what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
This is what we're getting set up into. It could even just be, hey, this is like the start of the campaign and what it's gonna be.
Yeah.
As you guys are literally starting. That's it.
Try
you don't
to
know
give,
anything else.
especially if you're running a module, try to give a bit more than I'm running module X.
Yeah.
I have no freaking clue what that is. Like,
You also
why?
find that a lot
What
of
am I going to be prepared for?
yeah,
Like,
and especially if like at least if you're experienced GM, some people who maybe are a little newer, it'll take you time to get used to, but just like the fact that remembering there are going to be new people out there watching us who maybe don't know anything, so they don't know what that campaign is. They don't know what to expect, and they're just going to apply thinking that it's an awesome game, and then you're going to find that they don't like it because they didn't know anything about it.
That's a really important point, and one of the reasons to talk about like campaign expectations, because even if you've like I don't know, let's say you have watched someone stream Ghost of Saltmarsh, because that's what everyone was doing for a while. I think they've shifted away from it now, but it was everywhere. You don't know how much flavor the GM has added, how much they've changed things up. Just because they're using the same source material doesn't mean they're going to have the same interpretation. And it's important to not assume that if you have seen something that is the correct version of that module, or...
I can definitely say that, because I've been in a game where I played Lost Mine of Vandelver. I played it 3 times. That's the very starter basic, like, 5e module. I played it 3 times, and one of those times the GM changed a lot of the characters and the NPCs, or gave physical descriptions that weren't originally there. And he played it up more. And then joining another one where I didn't know that was the case, and then not having those same things and expecting those characters to be like that, it makes you immediately realize the difference in quality of like who did what differently, because they were 2 different people and they had different expectations of the game.
Well,
so it's like now you know that, and now it's like remembering that as a player, you're not going to see exactly the same thing, because that DM compared to that one are different.
And even if you were to write on your thing, I'm running Waterdeep Dragon Heist, right? A lot of people know what that module is about, and some may not. But those who don't, they may be like, okay, well, they're running a module, but I have no idea what that is. And then you're making them go look it up, but then you're also risking a potential spoiler in the campaign that you may not want to give away. So it may behoove you to just write something as a little description, just so that I'm running this and this is the description, to just let them know what the campaign about without giving anything away.
So the next thing that in the order that we've written it is about character creation. So you've set expectations for the world itself. But when it comes to creating a character, like a basic, like what level are we going to be? But, you need to know that. You also need to know, like, are there limitations on things like races, alignments, classes? Are you all starting with bonus magical items? Or, hey, we really need someone with this particular skill. Please make sure you include it. Especially, like, it's really good to talk about that when you're joining an existing campaign, because you have to sort of find something that fits in with what's going on. And this is usually where GMs like to throw surprises at you. And it's very rarely included in, like, when you apply for a game, or, where you go like, yeah, this seems fun. This usually comes up in session 0 or during character creation. And it's like, oh, by the way, I hate monks, or by the way, you're all human, or by the way, you're all this certain age. I have session 0 for tomorrow, where they were like, here's the list of approved races, and I'm like, thanks, I hate it. So it often comes up at this point. And if you're someone who's like, I play one thing and I play it well, then you want to make sure that you realize whether or not that's going to be welcome in this campaign. Like, same thing, if you love playing spellcasters but it's a no magic world, you want to know about that. to figure out
or
if you're
like
okay with
magic's
it.
frowned upon.
Yeah.
Like you would want to join a game and then be like, oh, I'm not allowed to play that, or
Yeah,
my
or I
favorite
have to
race
hide
for me
it. Yeah.
is
Mhm.
half elves, and then finding out that half elves are kind of looked down upon in both societies of humans and elves. It's like, oh great, I don't want to play that now, but I want to play it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Something. Sorry, go for it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Something that I've noticed a lot of GMs doing here is they may have restrictions, like they may have one banned class, or these are the races, but then they go, oh no, pick whatever class you want, instead of, and that's cool, but it's also like, what does your party need?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I just appreciate being told, look, we really need someone with AoE damage, or we really need this. Just so you can set something up to have a smooth game afterwards. So, especially if, I play an extreme amount of characters over the last year or so. So for me, it's not, I have a burning desire to play this thing. It's like, I can play whatever and be happy. So, yeah, like trying to figure out like what do we need can be really, really valuable there.
Yeah, and during the character creation, if you do it, it also you can tell them, okay, are we doing point buy? Are we doing rolling for stats? Are we rolling for health? Are we, all of these extra things that like usually don't get, brought up in a lot of session zeros I've been, where I've had to go back and be like, so how am I doing stats? Like, you told me what you expect out of characters, but like, how do you want us to do stats?
Yeah.
That is a main one of just like, are we rolling it live? Do we get any re-rolls? Because some DMs allow that, some don't, and that's okay.
Am I being forced to roll a d6 for my HP that I don't want to roll? Because if I get ones repeatedly, I'm gonna die as a wizard.
That's also how the GM treats you during character creation, if you do it with them, says a lot. Because this is where I've noticed a lot of red flags. And things where I'm like, oh, I can tell this is going to be a thing in this campaign. Not necessarily a red flag, but just like, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to have to be working with. Like, for example, if a GM does something that is super standard and they are like, no, it's really unique, it's like, okay, sure thing, darling. Like, it's just like, it often shows a lot about the GM's insight into their own campaign. And I found that having them there during character creation is very helpful. I think that it's also going to show how does this GM handle questions, or how much information are they willing to share, that kind of thing. Same thing, if this is easier to do if you're all there in a group, but how does a GM treat character creation with a new player? Because, oh my god, if you let someone wreck their character because they have no idea how they're building it and don't give them a heads up, that's probably going to tell me that this is a GM who is either antagonistic or not fully understanding like how to work with a new player. It's always saying, you can do that, however, dumping con is generally a bad idea. Something like that.
Or even like telling players that, multi-classing is always a good thing, but if you're new, don't let them multi-class. If they're a brand new player, just tell them, just play the classic.
Yeah, just wait, and then, when you get there, you can add something else.
Yeah. Like, try to give them things that'll help them get used to the game before they actually try anything that's going to be way too, like, overbearing or, like, complicated for them, that it's going to make it not fun.
And sometimes you have to take some of this into an additional session 0.1 with someone if they're brand new and say they're playing a spellcaster and they need to pick their spells. well,
Yeah.
maybe you have a separate one-on-one session and you go
Mm.
through spells and you talk to them about, various situations in which you can use,
Yeah.
one versus, this one over here does this, and also, maybe give them a little insight into. These are predominantly picked in
Yeah.
most people who play mages,
Mm.
and this is why.
Yeah.
But
Or if you
if
say
you
like,
like flavor,
yeah,
you can pick others.
if you also say like a character, the person's gonna play a character class that you maybe as a GM don't really play and you don't know
Mm.
much information, ask your other players if they know it better
Yeah.
and see if somebody else could help them out. Because
Yeah.
I've also been there where I've had to be the person to help somebody because they didn't know anything
Yeah.
about magic and
Mhm.
the GM doesn't play magic. So it's like remembering that other people can also help out when you need it if you don't have any idea of what's going on or like how to help them out.
Exactly. And that's
Mhm.
also something that I think is important to talk about during session 0 is actually this goes perfectly into our next talking point, which is like the levels of experience at the table, including the GM, all of the other players, and yourself. Because it might be that you're an experienced player, but you know you're shit at explaining stuff. So you're not actually comfortable being in a teaching role. That's something that might be worth mentioning or talking about when you're discussing experience levels is
Mhm.
like those things. Like I might be perfectly happy to help you with a sorcerer or a druid, but if you're playing a wizard, I don't know what you're doing. So yeah.
I'd be happy to help you with any spellcaster. Don't ask me about the barbarian or fighter. I'm not gonna help you.
Yeah.
I have no offer there.
Another thing with character creation though is items and flavor.
Yeah.
If you want, to talk to them about, are we using starting items? Are we using starting gold? Are we using magic items?
Yes.
Now's the time to talk about it. Additionally, if you want to flavor things, say you want to use, a great sword, but name it something else, now's the time to talk about it. Or if you want to be a spellcaster and re-flavor your spells, aka Nier over there with his star spells, but just you sit there and you talk about it then, and then additionally, Nier, on character sheets, when you name your spells, maybe also in parentheses put what spell that is in the player sample.
Don't do that. just let them kind of guess what the heck your spell does, so that they don't know. Everyone has a learning experience with you.
Yeah.
That's also, especially if you're joining the game at a later point, like you're joining an existing campaign. If you don't know that everyone else has been allowed to rename things, it's going to be very confusing.
Another option also is like with that whole reflavoring and renaming, seeing what your DM allows, like, because as both me and Polish know, we both play sorcerers. And magic is one of those things that people are like, oh, well, all the spells are already put out there. Maybe ask your DM if it's okay to reflavor a damage, or reflavor what the spell does if, in case it just, you don't have an option that really fits with your background. Like if your character is solely ice magic, and you know that your class only somehow, for some reason, because Wizard of the Coast decided, gets fire, maybe ask your DM, is it cool if I just change all my spells to be ice-based? It's not a crazy thing out there.
That could
would be something to let them know.
Especially important if, say, you want to do an unusual type of draconic sorcerer. Let's say you want to specialize in acid damage. Good luck, there's like 5 spells that you can actually get that benefit from. So if you really want to do that, maybe have a talk to your GM and go, hey, can I reflavor, like, can I add acid as a damage option for, I don't know if Chromatic Orb has acid, but for example.
I think it does, but I don't remember. But like, I've done it before with a character who is a blade singer, and she specialized more into martial combat with a hint of ice magic to all of her spells.
Yeah.
And then looking at the spells and going, I don't have very many options.
Yeah.
I asked the DM, can I change these options so that they fit better to the character who's literally only
Mm.
using ice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
if
that's
you-
sort of expectation you want to have done before you make your character.
Yeah, exactly. Ask these questions so you know now before you make the character and go, well, I can't do that and I hate it. And there's nothing here, there's no option, what do I do?
Yeah. Same thing, like, again, I'd say acid ball. But yeah, for example, like if you want to create a ball of lightning instead of a fireball, that could quite easily be work the same way mechanically.
Mm-hmm.
But be a massive asset to someone who has lightning damage. So stuff like how much freedom will you let me have with the written material? And same thing. Oh my god, ask your GM's approach to spells. Because some GMs have very specific headcanons about how these spells work. And they will not tell you until the spell's in action. That is the most frustrating thing ever. Especially if it's a spell that is like a classic or something that is crucial to your build. Having included that and then afterwards finding out that the GM applies it very differently to what you're used to can be quite painful. So that's also something that is worth, like, how do you handle magic, or how do you handle this particular spell that I really, really want to use?
Thunderwave.
I was like, I know Fox wants to say Thunderwave. My go-to example is Polymorph.
Magic missile.
Yeah.
No,
There's
it's
heaps of them.
for me it's Thunderwave because it talks about a 15-foot cube, but it doesn't say particularly that has to be centered on you. It doesn't say that it has to, like, it is just like, oh, well, I could place it this way and it works in front of me. Or if some DMs where they're like, oh no, it's centered on you, you're but this is just the same as another spell. It just does a little bit more damage. Like, I don't want that.
Clearly, we've all had this exact thing happen to us.
Yeah. Thinking about that also, it's like, how do when I like think of like spells, I also think of the dynamic of what they would look like when I cast them.
Yeah.
And going, oh, I cast Thunderwave, but for some reason it also travels all the way back behind me and hits things behind me, and I'm like, how do I make a clap and then go, oh, it also affected people right here, but I clapped this way. So how sound works doesn't go behind me too. So like, I did this, and then it's just like, it went behind me, and I'm like, well, I screwed up my spell somehow, I don't know.
I'd say also with items, both during character creation, like, are you gonna have to track which components you have access to for spellcasting? Because if so, pick an arcane focus. But
Or just remember
resource
to tell your DM,
management.
please, let's not do that. Don't do that. Just don't do resource management. Just let's keep going with the game.
I'm
fun,
carrying 2,000 arrows with me right now. Don't worry about it.
Just don't worry about it.
But yeah, also same thing. If you're entering an existing campaign, like, will you have some limitations with the equipment, or are you as a level 9 character limited to the equipment available to a level 1 character because you made yours later?
Or like let people know if they do have to, like, like usually most games I've been in, you stop in town, it's assumed that everyone picked up the stuff they needed. I've also been in a game where like they're like, did you buy it? And I'm like,
Yeah.
You didn't tell me I had to buy things.
Yes.
So I would assume my character's smart enough to remember, I have this spell I can't cast without this. Maybe I should buy that.
Yeah.
So like I would always check it off my character sheet that I bought things, but at the same time, just remember to talk to your DM, because sometimes you might miss that.
Another thing is like the conversion rate. Most people go with the officials, but
Don't go with Electrum.
no one wants Electrum. But also, one of the games that I'm in has a different conversion rate between gold and platinum. Because the GM made a miscalculation the first time he gave us platinum, and now we're stuck with it.
Oh.
I mean, if you
Yeah.
don't want your Electrum, I'll take it.
Yeah.
My
Electrum
one
is not an
Electrum that I have.
accepted form of currency around here.
Everyone just looks at you like, what is that? I don't know what an Electrum piece is.
But yeah, same thing with the experience level. Like, if I know you're a new GM, I'm going to be a whole lot more forgiving as a player than if you tell me you've been running games for 30 years. There's a few things you should have picked up on, like, in that period of time. Same thing, like, if I know that I'm the only experienced player at the table, I am going to be a whole lot more patient and, helpful than if, literally everyone has been playing as long as I have, if not longer. So it's just good to, like, get a decent idea of that. Same thing, like, if someone's like, I'm playing a druid for the first time, you're like, it's okay, I'm here for you.
Yeah. If it's their first time playing any magic user of any sort, I'm always like, I'm here. Don't worry. Let me know if you need help. Because it's confusing.
It was so funny. I was in a character creation situation where I was helping another player, and the GM full on expected me to have memorized the damage type of every single weapon. And I'm like, I don't know. For a short bow, I've never played an archer. Like, we need to look that up. And they were like, what? Yes, when I say experienced, I don't mean having memorized every stat in the book.
What, you're telling me you didn't know short bow does piercing damage?
I know it does, like, piercing damage, but how much of it?
D6.
Is it a 1d6? Is it a 2d6 in some situations? Like...
That's true.
Yeah.
Once it gets, like, into martial weapons where they have, like, 30 different weapons...
Or even if it's a staff, like one-handed or two-handed, makes a difference in... Yeah.
It's true. There's a lot of things, honestly. It's better to look up than just assume, and then realize that it's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes 2 seconds to literally Google most of these things. Remember that Google's your friend.
And if you're playing an at-home game, like I am running a couple, and one of the things that I did, because I have a couple new people playing spellcasters, and I'm like, you know what I'm going to do, just for all of my players, I am going to separately a couple of sheets of documents that fully lays out the description of the spell to attach to the back of their character sheet so that we don't have to keep opening books.
5e tools is really good for that.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's my favorite online reference.
See me and be a player who printed off every single spell.
Actual spell book? Yeah.
Literally have a binder and just put every single spell in it. And then just reference them whenever
I'm not going to carry that around.
I did that for every session in my very first game.
I've written them out by hand, but that was for a sorcerer who had a limited amount of spells.
I printed them all off so that I could have the entire list.
I just made sheets to print out for them so that they could have it at the ready and not have to need a book to open to find it.
Even then, if you're playing online, obviously you can use, like some apps. There's like 5e tools. 5e tools, a godsend. Use it. There's also the Grimoire. It's the place that I use for all my spells. If you're playing in a not online game, you're playing with an actual group in person, use your phone. There's a lot of apps out there that literally tell you all the
we'll get to that under table rules because reasons.
And Lord Arctic also said spell cards. Yeah, if you want to buy the spell cards, or your DM does, having those available for you is also an easy tool.
Yeah. They don't have full range of spells available as spell cards, sadly, but it can still be a good option.
I mean, you can always use it as an idea to create your own stuff as well.
I'd say, so experience levels like around the board, including like experience levels with the type of character character class you're playing, is a really good thing to talk about. Because again, like, you may have the best session 0 and then afterwards realize that, while 2 of the people were completely new and have no clue what was said, because it was all like, you know, advanced game design and extreme high level lingo, and they were just like, yes, I don't know. So having that like early on, especially if you're all at a table, you're meeting each other for the first time, is a really good thing to go like, how much do you know about this game?
Yeah.
But if you're having a session, I'd recommend doing this anyhow when you're joining a game. But especially if you can't have everyone there at once for a session 0, is to ask the GM, what do you know about the people I'll be sharing a table with? Because that could be something like, okay, this person really, really likes tracking inventory. They have extremely flavorful descriptions of spells and they really enjoy that, or so-and-so has murder hobo tendencies. Like, indulge them occasionally, but also rein them in. Especially if you're an experienced player working with a newer, like, less experienced people. Then helping sort of set the tone for decent gameplay can be incredibly powerful. Same thing. I was asked if I was okay to play with men, and I'm like, yes. What?
Yeah.
But yeah, could be worth mentioning if you are like the only man joining an all-female group, or vice versa. And yeah, just a chance to like get a good read of people, and it can also help to learn, like in the long term, remembering how the GM described people and whether it aligns with how you view them after you've gotten to know them, can tell you a lot about how the GM reads people. So if they've described someone as antagonistic, when you then later learn that actually what this is about is that the GM doesn't like players who ask questions,
yeah,
that's going to tell you a lot about that GM. So it's a good way to like get an initial reading of people, but also to learn more about how the GM thinks about their players.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and if the GM shit talks everyone in the group instantly during session 0, big warning sign, guys.
If
really
also
is.
the GM asks you why you're playing, you know, if you're a man or a woman playing a male or female character, you know, generally also another warning of why does it matter?
Yeah.
Anyone can play anyone. Just have fun.
Yeah.
I've been asked that question many a time. Why do I play a female character?
Because I want to.
Because.
Yeah.
They're fun. Cool. Let's continue though.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything more on that before we move down the list?
I think it's all covered pretty much everything.
Cool. Because the next thing is, and I think this is really important, if this campaign had an alignment, what would it be? That goes into like the same thing with tone, but it can also be like lawful evil and lawful good can look very, very similar.
Yeah. They play a little different, but they have a similarity that people might get confused with.
And God damn it, Fox. Fox is literally just hanging out in the channel so he can get points to redo my emotes.
My God.
That's why he's there. Why is it a reindeer?
Well, welcome.
Damn it. Same thing. If this campaign had an age rating, what would it be? Because a PG rated campaign is something that's 18 only. Very, very different. Even though it may be like both grim dark fantasy and it may be, you know, lawful good. If you're expecting to be dealing with mature material, you want to flag that during session 0. next we come down to, we've touched upon this a little, like house rule and table rules. So firstly, what's the difference?
House rules is to me more like what is being in like the campaign and what they prefer. Table rule. Actually, no, I got that backwards. Table rules is that house rules I would put as like no food, no cell phones.
See, I'm the
no-
exact other way around. So it's good that we clarified that.
Well, I had it. I had it the other way first, so let's flip it. So table rules is like your no food, no alcohol, no phones, whatever. Your house rules will be more of your, I play things as such in the campaign, or we roll this way.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, house rules could be a bit of both. On house rules for your actual house if you're playing in it, and also house rules for the game itself.
Yeah.
But yes.
It's a good thing we clarified that. Otherwise, this would have
yeah.
been a very confusing discussion.
Yeah, that would have been very confusing. I would say house rules for me, though, yeah. It's generally like, if you're playing in a system, if there's something that you change, like, okay, in this game, like in the Buffy RPG, I use that one because we used a lot of house rules. Every character got one dodge, and that led to, if you used it, anyone who attacked you after that could just immediately hit you. So instead we changed the house rule to where you had multiple based off your dexterity. So however fast you were allowed you to dodge better. So it's like that. Essentially things that maybe make it easier or more fun for everyone so that you're not feeling like something that's not fun to play in because it's a really weird rule or a restriction for characters. That kind of stuff. Or maybe even just like rules in general for like the world setting and stuff like that. Like maybe elves don't exist in this world with dwarves. Like they just don't exist.
So what
Or
are
it's
some
an
of
all
the
human world.
most common house rules that you guys have come across? So rules related to the system and gameplay that you guys have come across during session 0, etc. Like what type of rules do people like changing up?
Usually they all relate to some form of character creation. So house rules that I know for a fact usually are relating to races that are off limits, or like, hey, instead of point buy, we're gonna be doing this type of stat roll, and it's gonna be like you have so many chances to re-roll or something like that. Most of those house rules that are just like for character creation are the ones I've run into. There isn't like many that I can think of like in system wise.
I've run into a few others that are how does this campaign want to do healing? Are we doing long rest healing, like standard how it's in the book? Are we doing, changing up how healing works on short rests? How is that changing? Additionally, I've run into how does counter spell work?
Yeah.
Or like, when can I use a bardic inspiration, or when can I use inspiration, or all those extra dice that you get from that you would get from bless, or when can I use that? And because in some campaigns a GM doesn't really care about when it's used, and they'll be like, you didn't make it, but if you use that bardic inspiration, you may make it, and then you make it, and great. Other, campaigns, predominantly more this way that I've seen is, you have to use your dice before they tell you whether it hits or misses.
Yeah.
As far as counterspell, it's like, do you have to announce counterspell before they roll the dice in click the spell in D20? Do you have to, say counterspell during their description before the spell? Or when they roll that spell, can you counterspell? I've run into that before too. And an easy way around it is DMs can roll without rolling the damage, and then it allows you to choose to counterspell or not.
Yeah.
Or they can actually use flavorful descriptions that give you that chance to use it. So I've ran into a couple extra.
I'd say, again, things like spell interpretations is pretty common around here.
Yeah.
Encumbrance is also pretty common to have house rules around. Most people just ignore it within reason. I think it's also like which variant rules do you choose to have or not have? Any homebrew, and if so, like, because what I hate is when the players are not allowed any homebrew things at all, but the GM gets to bring in like official homebrew. Don't do that. Have consistent stuff, like a consistent base level, so that if your PCs aren't allowed to be blood hunters, then don't have an NPC that's a blood hunter, for example.
Yeah.
In terms of table rules, I'd say one of the most common one is about phones, and you need to know that if you are someone who likes using a digital character sheet. If you like using your phone to look up spells, which is often how I do it. But some people are like, absolutely no phones at the table unless someone is dying. Like, I'd say the way that I prefer it is a happy medium. Like, don't be on your phone the entire game, but sure, like, if there's, your character is unconscious for a good part of the battle, and if you're listening in and want to check, like, your notifications in the meantime, no problem. Or if you want to look something up, like, absolutely.
Like for me, when I played in real life campaigns with actual groups, like where we meet up, I usually brought my computer with me. I brought my laptop, so I have that as like my character sheet, all my spells, everything is in there. So
take pity on your spellcasters.
Like take pity on us, because literally we're gonna be sitting there reading hundreds of spells constantly and having to plan a strategy around it. I'm gonna be on my computer or my phone or something and not paying attention sometimes.
And
there's a lot I have to do.
And I've seen a lot actually at one of the local stores here. Everybody will come in and they'll have their tablets or their laptop, and they have their D&D Beyond character sheet on, because that's just easier to do it there, easier to update.
I hate D&D Beyond.
Well,
I like for using, and that's also something that is worth setting. Like, do you require that your players enter their character into D&D Beyond or Roll20 or somewhere that isn't just on paper, or where you're playing the game? Like, if your game's played in Roll20, I expect you to have a character in Roll20.
Also, that topic that we just brought up with the, like things not to do at the table, like with say like having your phone. Please don't play a video game while we're in combat. Don't be on playing like League or Overwatch or any random game and being like, oh, it's my turn.
I only play it when we're not live, guys.
No, you're good. I've been in that where like I'm playing and then this person's been really quiet and then they get to their turn, we call them like 3 times and then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I've been playing this other game. I'm like, why?
What? Yeah.
What? Have you paid attention to anything? No? Oh, great.
Yeah, great.
And there may be other needs for requiring a phone at the table. For instance, I have hearing aids, but if someone turns on music in their game and it gets loud, I can turn it down.
Yeah.
And so like I may need it at the ready so I don't destroy my ears.
Yeah. That's another thing with like, it's a good thing to clarify if there's a reason why you really need to have something with you that whether like the most common thing is probably a phone or something, but It could be that you can't really do online maps because you've got a problem with your site, and that you need more theater of the mind, or that you need a physical map to be able to work with that. Same thing. There are character sheets that are made especially for people with dyslexia to just like make their lives a bit easier. And it's good to mention if you do use like any non-standard tools in your gameplay that you really need to be able to play. But yeah, also like, what am I expected to bring every single time is another good sort of thing to keep in mind. Some tables I've been at have the rule that you are expected to bring snacks to share with people.
I mean, I do always, but you know.
Yeah, like some of my tables do,
I'm
some
not-
don't.
I'm not sharing my Mountain Dew with you.
It's okay.
I didn't want it
I'm
anyways.
just gonna tell you right now, I'm not sharing it with you. I'm holding it hostage. It's mine.
Gonna say some other common things is, am I required to have physical dice? Yes, you are. If you're playing at a table, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Now also, if you don't have any yet, talk with your DM. They'll probably have sets.
Exactly.
Or just work with other players to borrow until you can buy one.
Yeah.
Because there are really cheap sets you can buy easily.
Yeah, in most cases with a live game, yes, you will need probably one set of the 7 dice and then another extra set of d6s just to have on the side.
Yeah.
In most games. But again, talk with your DM. I know a lot out there do not prefer the apps just because a lot of them don't trust the randomness on the app.
Yeah.
And it's also really easy to rig.
Yeah. Have your dice, but also, you know, just have a bag to hold them in. You don't need a really pretty bag, but
yes,
you know,
you do.
you really need a pretty bag if you want one, but you can also just use any bag.
You need
Or
at
you
least
can literally just
19
put them
sets
in
of
a container.
die as well, so...
Yeah, you need a lot at all times.
You don't. It's more
Make
than
sure you spend also a lot of money on them.
Oh, clearly.
You know, okay, because you want some fancy dice.
If you are playing a live game, it is also a good question to ask on if you are using a map, and there are many things. Do you have to bring your own mini for your character, or is that something that the DM has available to provide?
Or you
I'm
have
sorry.
to use stand-in dice for that?
One of my friends just messaged me saying Sean must share his Mountain Dew, and I'm just like,
It's a new house
sorry.
rule. So new
It's not a
table
house rule. I'm
rule.
not sharing. It's mine. It's all mine. Okay, this is mine. You don't have it.
Oh yeah. Also, something we talked about here before is what's going to happen if I'm not at the table. So if I can't make it 1 week because you know life happens, sometimes you might not be able to. Like I missed the very first session of my longest running campaign because my dad was getting married and I kind of had to be there. But is there a base level of like attendance ratio? What's the minimum number of players to have a session? What are the rules for what happens to your character if you're not there? Will you be expected to... Oh, clearly. Will you be expected to, like, control another player's character in combat if they're not there? That's something that... I'm not...
And I would even, like, if you do let other people control your character, talk with the other players and see who you trust the most to, like, run your character, because your character is obviously yours. You play them a certain style. Maybe you trust this person who knows your character knows they wouldn't do something without, you know, consideration first.
Yeah. This is some of the most common.
If there's a TPK, just you know, let the player that's about to die as well possibly know that, hey, you might die. Are you cool with that? Because you might die.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a little bit of that, and I think me personally as a DM, if you guys are on your way back to town, you know, I may prefer to leave you in town, just because safer for the PC. But if you are out on a mission already, like, what am I going to do with you? Having those things ready to go as far as in X situation versus Y situation, what are we going to do? Really let you know ahead of time, if they have a plan for all these things, they've probably experienced it before, and it's a good sign for a DM versus if your DM does not have any of that planned out, that's a bad sign.
Yeah. Oh yeah, other things is like, what am I expected to do between sessions? Like, do we have to keep a diary in character? If I miss a session, who's going to fill me in on what happened? Is that done in character or out of character? We'll get to backstories pretty much straight after this. So I've had a GM require that I write up my backstory in a story format. At which point I said, no, I'm in 6 games at the moment. You'll get dot points, deal with it. So that's also how much time outside of the actual session do you expect me to dedicate? And in what form? Because I might be more than happy to figure out, like, spend a lot of time thinking about it, planning what to do, but I might not be able to sit down and write something up for you.
Like, I might enjoy writing, a 10-page essay about my character's backstory and their life that they've already been through, but another person probably doesn't want to do that, and that's fine, because we have different ways of, portraying our characters.
And sometimes it's also just like, how much time do I have that week?
Yeah. There were times where I've done that, and then I've also been like, I don't know anything about my character because I've literally had like a minute to myself.
Yeah.
So.
Same thing, like, okay, we'll move those two around. When it comes to backstory writing, if there's anything that you want us to steer away from, is a good thing to cover. That goes sort of into what age rating and which tone do we intend for this game to have. That can be pretty crucial. Same thing, like,
any triggers or X cards. Market in there.
We'll get to like the actual safety mechanisms later, but more like, is there a theme that I should stay away from?
Right. And then
could be for story reasons or safety reasons.
Additionally, like, things that maybe you put in there to highlight that may allow them to tie you into the story. That, in my opinion, is things that you should add. But don't go overboard, because it's not always about you, it's about the party.
Yeah. I like having a lot of optional threads in my backstory where it's like, this thing happened or this thing could happen, but it's not something that has to be a factor. Like, I've got a character who one of their parents happened to be a warlock, and they were promised to that patron, but because of something else in their bloodline, that didn't end up happening. Could be the end of that story, or that could be made into a major character arc.
Yeah.
It's like, could be something that's like, okay, that was a thing. So that's the way that I like to play it, so that my GM has options on what they want to or don't want to engage with. But yeah, same thing. If you have anything that's linked to the ongoing campaign, like, you might not want to be the secret child of the main villain without flagging it and checking with your DM first. Same thing. Are you a like classic trope? I'm actually a god. I'm just playing with my human form right now. A lot of those things that you see often with newer players. Just like, so what's something that should be encouraged or steered away from in backstory and for like overarching character motivation? The next two things that we wrote down are more mechanical, and that's sort of, what's the role play to combat ratio that I can expect, or what are you hoping it will be? Because
Yeah.
again, that might
Mhm.
change as the campaign goes on, or hang on, they're all going after side quests where it's like kill all of the harpies, and they're doing 9 of those in a row. Well, doesn't matter if I wanted 90% roleplay. That's what happened. Next question that you guys have brought up as well was, how do you handle XP? So is it per encounter? Is it milestone? Is it party-based or individual? Because that can be incredibly important to know as well.
Yeah, because I would say it depends, because I've played in games where GMs only count combat as experience. And that can be bad if you're playing a game that's, like 80% roleplay with 20% combat, and your characters feel like they never get any better because they aren't fighting all the time, even though there are ways that they can also use their skills and talents outside of combat. So I would say let people know beforehand so that they don't go, wow, we've been doing like 5 or 6 sessions full of like heavy RP and like story and intrigue, and nothing has happened with our characters. Oh, but you don't get XP because you haven't fought anything. Let me know that so that I don't go and waste my time for 10 sessions sitting at level 1 or 2.
Yeah. So just make sure that everyone's aware of that.
Also, like, people know if they need to calculate experience or if you're doing milestone, because sometimes, like, as a player, I don't calculate my experience very well.
Yeah, I honestly, personally, I prefer if the GM just goes, yeah, you guys level up now. I'm like, cool, great.
Easiest one, because I don't want to have to keep track of random experience and hoping that we level up.
Yeah.
And also, I think it leaves a bit more of an intrigue and surprise when you do level up, instead of me going, okay, we're almost there. And your players feel like they have to like fight more.
It also prevents metagaming, like, oh, we'll delay going after the boss and do this side quest because we're really, really close to leveling up. So that's
like, we're like 100 XP away. Let's just go and fight some random thing, and then we'll
let's murder some NPCs, right?
Yeah. It's what'll lead your players.
Is there a fighting pit around?
Yeah. Because I've been there where players have wanted to just do something because we knew that we were about to level up anyway.
Yeah.
And
even if it doesn't make sense.
And you want to be able to surprise your players. Take that over as a weekend task or something in your usual prep, because if they are 100 XP away, you can just be like, you guys all have been good this week. I'm just gonna let you level up. Without them really knowing actually how close they were.
Or even like in some cases I've been in the middle of a boss fight and we level up and are given extra abilities because we level up now that we now have access to, which is kind of cool in that sense of your characters feel like they just learned some new knowledge, and it's going to really help them because they've been practicing maybe like a technique or a spell, and now it works.
Yeah.
And they needed it right here and then. So it's like a kind of cool thing if you play it into the story as well with their level ups, instead of just telling them, okay, you guys leveled up, go rest up and learn your new shit. It can be really fun if you incorporate why they level up, what experience they've gotten into the story as well.
God damn it, I don't have to type. Arctic, I really do like your approach to XP. Where you have both for attenders, like you show up, that's a base level of experience. Then for creative roleplay, which I think is underutilized, and I wish there was more of an incentive for that in D&D especially. And then for combat and defeated opponents. I really like that approach, I have to say.
I definitely think that's actually one of the more fun ones, is outside of combat. Giving players experience for using their characters' talents, skills, knowledge they would use, and being creative with it. Because they are, not just combat-oriented people, they are also characters who can do things outside of it. So rewarding that is also really good because it makes your players feel like, hey, this is something I should do more often.
So the last question under players before we... would you guys have time to do this one, then a quick break because I need coffee before I collapse, and then the last push?
Yeah, that is good. Yeah.
Okay,
that
awesome.
Sounds good.
So last question here. and we're not going to break this one down, but more in general, as a player, what questions do you want to be asked during session 0? Like, especially asked by the GM or other players instead of having discussed.
First thing is always, what do you want out of this campaign and this story?
Mm.
It is my major one. If you don't tell me what I want, and like if I can't get any ideas about putting my input into the story, I don't want to be there, because I don't want to be in a game that I don't feel like I have input in.
What class and race do I prefer? Not that you can't double up on things, because you can have a party with 2 rangers and that's okay. But just to get an idea so that everybody is kind of like, or what am I thinking about playing? So it may not be what I prefer, but what am I thinking about playing? Because maybe I prefer rogues, but this campaign I really wanted to play a bard.
Yeah.
And if I prefer rogues and I really want to play a bard, maybe that person will be like, yeah, let's let the person that always plays a sneaky rogue play that bard.
Yeah.
Or you just have 2, or you have 5 and you make a big band.
Or you play a group of warlocks and you make a group cult.
But something like that coming out. I do think it's a good question for, at least for players to ask the other players, and you don't have to go into full detail, but like it's still with the same thing for later of just like, is there anything that we should avoid as far as topics?
Yeah.
If we're chatting in Discord, and even just outside of the game, we're chatting in Discord, is there a topic that I should avoid having in the Discord chat for everybody?
Yeah, and I should add that I think that's an important question to ask. Personally, I prefer to be asked that in private.
Oh yeah.
And then so that again, that's not necessarily something that I want to share with the entire table, but more want the person in relative control to be able to steer away from. If yeah, I'd also I think, how do you prefer to give feedback, or how do you like post sessions to be handled?
Yeah.
Is something that I like to be asked because it's very rarely covered. So, for example, do you want, like, are you a fan of having a wind down session afterwards? Again, keep in mind I do a lot of streamed games, so you can't always talk about it while you're live. Especially if there was something serious that needs to be covered. And
I'd say also,
or just
I think
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. A question I usually like to be asked as a player, but it's like, what level of what role and level will our characters take on in the game? Like, how important to this story are they? Are they like the focus of the main campaign? Are we like a side part of it? What exactly is the characters going to be doing that's going to make the overall arching story? Like, are the backstories of the characters going to be tied in? Are there going to be things that are going to come up with our backstories ever? Are we just running through this main story and that's it? Like, those are questions I would want to be asked. Like, do you guys want this? And if so, like, how do we want to tie it in? Do we want to do anything with everyone's characters? Do we want everyone to work together with their characters? Things like that. Yeah. Because I like usually tying in characters to a world, or a group into a world. So it's kind of the thing I'd want to be asked.
To go along with what Polish was saying is asking people if they want what has been termed by some also as like aftercare, or if you have a really intense session do we around for the next 20 minutes after and make sure everybody's good and, kind of bring the emotions from really high at the end of that session to kind of get back down to normal.
Yeah.
Is there anything else I'd like to be asked? I think something that should be done more is like, please describe what you do not want out of this campaign. Because it's a lot of like, what do you want out of it? But there's a lot of things I'm okay with and can enjoy. And then there's some things that make me go, I'm out.
Yeah.
So I've been watching Dragon's Den, and it's like the catchphrase from there.
Yeah, I feel that.
Because I can work with a lot of things, and then there are things that just make me want to like jump off a freaking cliff right then and there.
Another thing would be like, let me know beforehand, like, what, I guess, rating would we put this game at?
Yeah.
Is it PG, PG-13, M-rated, like, adult 18
What's
plus,
your...
like, you need all of this?
Oh yeah, and that's also something that, like, are you okay with your character being romantically or sexually involved with anything or anyone? Like, is it okay if NPCs hit on you, for example?
And, like, for some people, that might not be cool. They might not want to be, like, flirted at a lot. But some people might be okay with that, or might want to actually have like in-depth like character conversations with NPCs, or even get emotionally attached to them. So it's kind of like that as well. Of like, I want to be asked, is that an okay thing, and is everyone cool with like what rating we're gonna put this at? Because jumping into a game and immediately finding out that like some really disturbing topics are in the game. You don't really want that if you're expecting a PG game.
Like I had something. This is probably the most extreme example I can think of. It's from the longest campaign that I've been in. We started in April and are still going. But the GM decided to throw a city that is based on slavery at us. Okay, but it also included like underage forced sexual slavery. None of that has ever been discussed. We've never gone, we're fine with like that level of darkness, or ever had the question of, is there anything that isn't okay for you to cover? So that came out of nowhere.
I can say, like, I've been in games where we discussed like what is okay backstory, what is like not okay, what's like M-rated and allowed. Like, I've been in a game where my character had some troubling, like, remembrances in their past, and it were things that are, like, M-rated.
Yeah.
But that was because everyone was cool with the M rate. Like, we're all knowing that there's going to be some darker topics, so it's okay. But that's because we've discussed it beforehand. Is this okay, and is it fine for everyone?
Exactly.
If not, we'll go and do something else.
Yeah. Again, like, I'm a firm believer that you can have anything in your campaign, provided everyone at the table is okay with that.
Yeah.
But you need to, with stuff like that, you really have to be sure.
Especially because you don't know everyone else's, like, life experience.
Yeah.
So you might end up saying something and thinking, oh, that's perfectly fine to me. There's another person at your table, though, who gets triggered by something like that, and you don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable, or
I think
like
it's
they
also
don't want to be there.
Like, is this something that exists in the background, or is it something that we are suddenly in the middle of?
Yeah.
Because again, we were in the middle of this as a major quest. Couldn't like walk away from it really.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that would be like,
yeah,
it'd be fine if it were like something. Now we could just walk away from it.
Yeah.
And just be like, okay, we're not gonna do that again. But if it's tied into your main plot, make sure that everyone's okay with it first. Because if it's integral to your story, it's gonna be very hard if everyone's like, oh, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, and also if it's something that severe, like check those types of themes before, because I can't think of many things that are more, I don't know, hardcore isn't the right word, but that are more potentially upsetting and personal for someone.
Mhm.
And I'd even recommend saying, I plan on having some of these elements. If this is not okay, please contact me about it, as opposed to asking people to share what they're not okay with. It's something this specific. I'd want to be asked, like, are you okay with X, Y, and Z? Because again, it wouldn't even cross my mind to even mention something so specific.
Mhm.
And it's a very unique combination of factors that, yeah, it's more like communicate a ton if you plan on doing something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, any last questions that we'd want to be asked during session 0 as a player?
Nothing other than what we
Yeah, I was like, I don't think I can think of anything. I
covered.
mean, there's probably a couple other things, but it's like, at this point, I think we've covered most of it.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick, about 5-minute break. I'm going to make sure that we run an ad break on the channel just because, and then we'll be back with session 0 from a GM's point of view. Yeah, we'll get to starting soon because I don't have a be right back screen at the moment. Sorry. So yeah, we will be right back. is my audio? Alright. Damn it! Knocked my freaking camera over. First thing I did. It's been happening a lot lately. That ruined my intro. But yeah, we're back, everyone. Damn it. So, in the first half, we focused a lot on the player experience. And sort of, as a player going into a session 0, some things to keep in mind, what to ask, what we want to be asked personally. And for the second half, not even second half, it's slightly shorter. On the GM/organizer side of things, because again, if it's a stream, then you may have one person who's organizing it, but another person running the game, and they might also have some things to cover. So yeah, as a GM, when you plan a session 0, what do you sit down to plan to talk about?
It's, to me, a lot of the same of kind of what we covered, of like wanting to get out what everybody's are. What is my expectations for the game? And or, what are your house rules, etc., etc., etc. A lot of that is very similar from the GM's perspective. I think having material prepped ahead of time, as far as, or at least notifying people either ahead of time or having things ready up front, as far as these are the things I allow, these are the things I don't allow. Actually thinking it through and having whatever documents you need ready.
I would say handouts are definitely a good one. Like a thing that you could maybe as a GM have ready for your players.
Handouts, and just like, is there, you should have a list of common questions that you get asked with a response that you have prepared and maybe have adjusted over time at your session 0s. That, is, you coming in, here is your response.
Yeah.
I think that asking what role do you want the party to have is something that I think is underestimated. And to just figure out not just what they want out of the game, but what they want to try to achieve together. So are you the villains of this universe? Are you, classical heroes? Is there a particular type of story that you're all really on board with? Because if so, the module I'd prepped is not going to cut it. And
that would be a good one. And definitely, especially because people want to play in modules, and a lot of modules are very, very restrictive in what you can do. So you might want to know ahead of time that the module you're running in has a very strict story you have to follow, and you might not get a chance to go, oh, well, we want to go to this city and explore my character's backstory. You might never go to that city. It's not there. You just don't travel. You don't travel there ever. So just expectations of letting people know what's going to be happening.
Or if you're running a module, most likely you may have a player that has played the module. Letting them know ahead of time, if you do or do not, change from the module. Hopefully, as a DM, you can make adjustments so that it's not the same game played every time. But I know there are some DMs out there that are like, I am going to run it by the book, and if you've already played through this, you already know the story, and you already know everything that's going to happen, where all the traps are and everything like that. So letting them know ahead of time that coming into this, if you have played this module, whether you have adjusted from it.
Or even then, if you're a new GM and you're not used to running modules, if you're not used to changing things, it's okay to run it directly as
Yeah.
by the book as possible, because sometimes if you're newer, it might be really hard to go and change everything. Especially don't do it if you don't know how to balance things yet, because it's all there for you. Try and follow along as much as you can before trying to change anything.
I think it's also important for a GM to know not just the experience levels, but the nature of that experience. Because you can have a few different things here. So one, you can have someone who is a super experienced role player but new to the system you're running.
Oh, yeah.
That person is going to have different needs, like in terms of understanding that transition compared to someone who's new to role playing in general. Same thing. If their only experience is watching streams or watching YouTube shows, which shows have they watched? And maybe you need to have a conversation about how your game is going to be different from things you may have seen. Like, the classic example is Critical Role, which has, like, heaps of production value, professional actors, and just like, hey, that's different from what you'll get at a regular table.
We're all random, just people just playing. We're not paid to, like, come up with crazy fun ideas on the spot with our character, because we don't think
Not
that
yet. Depends.
I mean, eventually. But
who
most
knows?
people that you're going to be playing with are just doing it because it's a hobby and not a job they actually want to get in.
And,
so they're going to not know anything.
And with the Critical Role example also comes letting them know that, hey, you may really like what they have put on their show, but a lot of that has been homebrew because they came from Pathfinder to D&D, and so they have had to homebrew a lot of things to make it work in D&D that you may not have in the book.
Yeah. Like, there's a lot of stuff they had to homebrew because it existed in Pathfinder and it doesn't exist in 5e. Also, the Matthew Mercer effect, just don't expect your GM to be able to create a fantastical world every possible second, because it's just...
Are you saying my one-shot wasn't on the second level?
No, I'm sorry, you're not Matthew Mercer. No, but, like, I have actually watched, like, joined games, had applications, and then seen people post about, my roleplay experience is Critical Role. And that's what I expect out of the game, is it to be Critical Role, and I'm like, you can't expect that, because they get a budget, they are paid to do this, they have camera crews and all sorts of setup. Most average people aren't going to have.
Well, and it's also, if you are getting paid to do it and not having to work for a paycheck outside of that, you have the time to hone that craft.
For most of us, role-playing isn't a full-time thing, or even a part-time, reliable job, if we put it that way. I think it's also, like, just setting expectations for, and again, if you are a new GM, tell people. Don't pretend to know more than you actually do. Oh, thank you so much, mate. It's very nice of you.
It's a learning experience for everyone. Oh, nice.
And
I'm going to give you a Santa coffee cup because you deserve it.
There's going to be Santa coffee cups all over the place.
Oh no, and...
Oh yeah, and the reindeer...
Rudolph wine.
Rudolph wine. Just in case you wanted some.
It's, in case you're wondering, that's a red blend.
It is now, apparently. Was a galaxy before?
The jokes.
But yeah, so I would say there's some expectations. And even that, I would say, as a new GM, it's okay to be new. It's okay to not know anything and tell people that you don't know something, because it's a learning experience for everyone.
I'd also
everyone has to learn things.
Yeah, and heaven knows that even the most experienced GM can discover new rules or something that they'd overlooked before. Or even something where they're like, I hate this rule, I don't want it in my game, and I'll learn to do something to work around it. But
I think it took me until my fourth or 5e game before I found out that spellcasters couldn't cast both a first and second level spell or like whatever level spell as a action and bonus action.
They can't.
I didn't know that because I didn't
action
realize
economy
that in the rule
for spellcasters.
it had economy. So I was like, oh, every DM had told me that it's fine because at the time 5e was like literally just come out. So we didn't know all the rules. And it's okay to admit later on being like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see the like one little detail in there somewhere that said about it. So it's a good thing.
Right.
Same thing.
Learning.
This is another good thing to talk about. D&D keeps having new books added to it constantly. There's also, the playtesting material in the Unearthed Arcana. And as a GM, you might want to set expectations of what's going to happen if a new class is released. Am I allowing you to then make a character in it? Is it going to depend? Like, we've had the Artificer being released very recently. And I can fully understand a lot of GMs going, I haven't had time to learn it, therefore I'm not allowing it right now, but I might in the future.
It's kind of like when they dropped the Mystic class at one point, and I was like...
Yeah, it's Unearthed Arcana at the moment.
It's Unearthed Arcana, but it was like, people wanted to play it, but it's like, it's still very new.
Yeah.
And not many people have playtested that yet, so it's one of those things just some people might not want it yet. And if they do let you have it, if they tell you later on that they don't get upset. Because again, it might be broken right now.
Yeah.
There's things that are not tested just yet. We don't know how to work it. And even then, we don't know the party setups or work around it. So other players might not know how your character even works.
Yeah.
And your DM may not have, which this is totally fine, they may not have the available funds for all the supplements.
Yes.
So if you are not able to use spells from a supplement, that's still okay because, just make that aware ahead of time that I do not have the supplement, I don't know these spells, and therefore I would prefer not to use these spells in my campaign. That is okay, just make it aware.
Send a link to my favorite database of spells and a lot of other really, really good references in chat. It's completely free. All content is available, so you don't have to, subscribe to get access to it. It's called 5e Tools, and it has everything you need for character building. It easily differentiates between Unearthed Arcana and heaps of different things. So, warmly recommend that, especially if funds are an issue. And it's perfectly fine to say to your players, like, I can't promise I'll be able to afford every new book, or, because we have the rule of no online things at the table, therefore we are restricted to, the physical things that we own. But I think it's worth, that website is a lifesaver. And it's really, really good. It's very easy to sort everything. So yeah, I warmly recommend it.
And also, just in case, if you have a little bit extra, just send them everything that you need. If you have a supplement, send that DM a supplement if you need to.
Yeah.
Because there are books that I have that a DM didn't have, and I was like, here you go, because if you don't have it, here's access to it so that you can see what it's about.
Yeah.
Because maybe there's something in there that's really cool, and they just never knew about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing where we've talked a bit about, steering away from things or stuff players aren't comfortable with. I think it's worth talking a bit more about limits, preferences, and boundaries. And, if there's any particular safety tools that will be used during the campaign. And, asking for feedback on those. Same thing, there may be things where you're like, these things I will not allow in my campaign. Again, sexual abuse of children is probably something that most people would go, yeah, that's not gonna be a thing. I'd say that's pretty standard to not really include that. Preferences might be things like I really enjoy running darker type games. Or it could just be things like, gosh, what am I? Oh, I prefer if these particular races are included compared to the other ones, or I prefer to run a magic heavy world, and talk about both limits and preferences with players. So that again, you find something you're all comfortable with. I'd say boundaries is like limits and boundaries sort of go hand in hand. There's a soft limit, which is like in some instances I might be okay with this, but depending on like the severity or even if I'm having a good or bad day. Thank you so much for that follow, mate. It might, I might be okay with this being mentioned, but let's please not have a full 10 session quest about it. So that's something that's more of a soft limit. And then, there's hard limits where it's like absolutely not under any freaking circumstances. And if you do have a hard limit, either as a GM or as a player, that you think might be a factor, I would strongly recommend establishing that from the start.
Yeah, whether it be, you really don't want sexism in your game or ableism, make sure to mention that up front. It's definitely things that you need to get out there as far as, just letting them know that this is not something that is for me, if you are going to include this in your game. But there's other ways that you may be able to talk to your DM to get around some of these things. Like, I know at Mustang Art create a really good, and I'm going to try and have her on sometime, potentially, but she created a really good battle wheelchair. And it gets around the topic of, some people always wanting to be like, okay, well, we can magically fix this. Instead of any disability being magically fixed, there's ways to incorporate that into your character and still be okay for D&D or TTRPG game. So, things to talk about.
And especially if it's something like a disability, then maybe have a talk with that player of how they want to approach it. Because that could be, again, like if someone is battling an incurable disease, they might want to experience a dream world with a cure for it. Or they might go, this is something, like it's a part of my identity, I want it to be a part of my character's identity. And for them to like still be a badass adventurer who just happens to have this condition or this disability. And knowing what approach they want is going to make a big difference to how you treat that character and what you plan for that character. And I'd say it's the same thing as well if you are going to have something like, whether it's ableism, sexism, all of the isms that the world can have. Maybe ask like what degree people are comfortable with. Like, sure, you may run across the occasional asshole, but if there's like systematic discrimination, you can't even enter certain towns type thing. Like, those are two very different things.
The suspicion may be for like a race or things like that, definitely. I know I played in a game at one point where I was okay with it because I was like, I want it to be a thing that I want, like we were talking about, but I played a character who was gay. And there are people who I was okay with it being like some people are not okay with it, some people are. And it was fine because I like playing that character being able to represent things that I have been through myself. Like, it's a fun thing to be able to roleplay, but also still be a character who gets respect from their friends and their party. So it's like you can go through those topics and still have like negative sides to them, but also remember to play it up as like there's some negative sides and there's some positive sides to everything.
I think there's two things, because I want to touch upon something that Game Masters Vault just brought up. That if you do say no to something, or if, for example, their player wanted to play a lizard folk, which is, fine. Not one of my favorites, but a lot of people enjoy them. But mention that, hey, in this world, this is what that race is like. If it deviates a little from expectations, or if there's something you can't get from just reading the player's handbook or whatever source book you're using for it. So setting that out from the start, instead of saying, like, letting a player create a character and then session 1 starts, oh, by the way, you can't read, you can't write, you can barely communicate in sentences. Oh, and fire is a novelty where you're from. So having that conversation early on.
It's definitely a good idea to let them know about your world, definitely.
Yeah. And I'd also say a lot on, like, there are different reasons why players create characters that are different from themselves. And, for example, if you notice during character creation that someone is going down a pretty offensive route with their character, for example, this is the first time I play a woman, she's going to be a complete slut and whore herself out to anyone. Maybe talk to that player. Like, it sort of goes both ways, that, especially if it's a serious campaign. Like, you can have so much fun with archetypes and stereotypes, provided everyone is okay with it. But it's going to get real uncomfortable if someone, goes into some pretty negative stereotypes in an otherwise serious game. So yeah, just making sure that the tone fits what everyone has agreed upon.
Well, and as, like, if I were to DM a serious game as opposed to our one was like, I already know this is going to be a disaster, so let's let the train wreck happen. But for a serious campaign, it is one of those things that I like to kind of, at least give me, you don't have to give me your entire backstory right away.
Yeah.
But at least give me portions of your backstory so I know what kind of road you are going down before we start the campaign with each of the players, to where I can be like, okay, this may be a problem with, the party, and therefore let me talk to this person and see if I can, get them to not change their character, but maybe adjust a few things to make it fit more along with the party. So I personally like seeing at least a portion of the backstory beforehand. I know some DMs are like, well, the backstory will come out during the campaign, and that's their own way of doing things. I just know it has turned out a lot better in my opinion, when I see the backstory ahead of time.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to, like, the very first thing we talked about was, like, what's the tone of this game? And it is absolutely crucial for, like, all aspects of what comes after. Even if it's just, like, player compatibility. If you have extremely chaotic players, like your murder hobos or chaotic stupid, and then you have people who love, like, heavy role-playing, that's going to be hard for everyone to navigate, and it may not even be possible to solve that in a campaign unless everyone is really good at sort of giving and taking and all of that. So that's going to set some expectations already there. But another thing to sort of talk about during session 0 is, we touched upon a bit, but safety tools. I am a notorious opponent of the X card, especially on stream. However, that doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, there can be no safety tools whatsoever. The reason I don't like it is that it forces you to reveal exactly what the problem is, which can be really sensitive sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, if it's again something like you encounter someone who survived childhood sexual abuse and you're like, nope, that could be very revealing to have to do that. Especially again, like I've seen some people whose safety tool on stream is just do this if you're not okay. And I'm like, that is very exposing.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. What we use here on the channel is like, please message the GM or the organizer to ask them to steer away from it. If they don't notice, ask for a break. To just say, oh, I have to use the bathroom. Can we go for a quick break right now? To like protect people's privacy a bit as well.
Especially because it's different also with a stream game, but
yes.
like a stream game, you're in front of plenty of people online who could see this. Maybe you don't want everyone to know something that
exactly
they don't need to know.
And again, like what you see with a lot of the higher, like long-term professional shows like Critical Role, they will probably have had a lot of those discussions off screen because they've known each other for a very long time. And but just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Especially if you're with a newer group, there's a lot of people who are probably, again, like they're already uncomfortable with that situation, but maybe they're uncomfortable with conflict or confrontation or even just bringing up something. So you don't know that they're actually uncomfortable and you didn't know it because they were too scared to talk to you.
Yeah.
So it's just like letting people know that they can message you privately about it.
And always as a GM have one way to be contacted.
Yes.
For instance, on the stream here, the actual Roll20 chat is not being shown on the screen, and therefore, you can whisper the GM and it not pop up in front of everybody.
Yeah.
If that is being shown on the actual stream overlay, have some sort of backup, whether they message you in Discord or whatever, video and voice chat service you're using, like Zoom or something. Have some way for them to contact you.
Absolutely.
That you know how to, like, pretty quickly check if you hear the sound.
Yeah. Just repeatedly add them in Discord. Just repeatedly add them in Discord until they get you.
Don't do it on my
just
channel
because
because I have to capture Discord in windowed mode, so I can't see things that people post to me in Discord.
Do it personally to Polish so that she can't do anything.
Stop it!
I'm not the bad influence this time.
I'm not a bad influence. I'm a perfectly fine influence.
I was also gonna say that, for example, I'm a person who likes giving feedback after the session when I've had time to think about it a bit. Like sometimes I might have to think of, am I actually okay with the way this is going or the way it was handled? Like, do I need to cool down after an intense, like, role-playing moment? I just think it's important to have that line of communication open beyond, like,
the session.
Beyond the session.
I'd say, like, sorry, you can go ahead.
If similar to that, if like you are fine with the direction that it's going, but it is along a path that you don't necessarily like, that may be something to talk about after the session, as long as it stayed along a path that you were still okay with, just don't cross the line. That would be good for after a session. If it is crossing that line, you should have some way to be like, just stop right now. Because we as a group, we do not want to cross lines.
Like, it's just meant to be fun for everyone, and if that happens, it's just not fun for that person. And now everyone else is going to have to, like, also deal with someone at their table not being okay. Not that they
Yeah.
have to deal with that person's problems, but you know that someone isn't having fun for whatever reason.
Yeah. I'd also, because like we just said like about things about like, after session. Sometimes also because different people process things different.
Yeah.
Me, I don't really know what to say like right directly after the session of what did you like, what did you not.
Yeah.
Usually I take like that night to think on everything, and then the next day I have a lot more to say on it because I haven't fully like thought out my process of how everything went. There are a lot of things I might have liked and I have not liked, but I haven't really got them all together in a well cohesive unit to go, this thing, here's this.
Yeah.
No, I'll usually take a night to go and think on it and then come back and be like,
Yeah.
here's the things I liked, here's the things I didn't, or that we could improve upon.
So yeah, having like, it could be something like, hey, I need X number of days before the next session if there's something you really want me to change. So to set that boundary as well as a GM, like, please don't tell me half an hour before the game that you have a big problem with the quest room right now.
Yeah.
So, again, like having a sort of, like, what's the approach you want to take and ensure that everyone is happy with that communication. Because especially if you're a new GM, finding something out for very little notice can make things extremely difficult for you. But yeah, another thing too, sort of similar, doesn't have to be about like triggers or things like that, is things people might struggle with, including like issues with accessibility. It could be something so simple that if one of your players uses a wheelchair, don't have things on the second floor if there's no lift. Like, sometimes it's literally that simple. We have... Was it Arctic who said that one of his players used a lot of sign language? So they ended up... I'm not sure if it was Arctic or if it was someone else.
I think it was Arctic because I think he had said something about how they changed sign language to be like Thieves' Camp, basically.
Yeah. So to like use something like that and make it into an in-game thing. It could
a
also...
good way. Like, I know, for instance, like some games I played in, like we have a general idea for like what the language sounds like. So I played in games where Elvish sounds like, you know, this, or Dwarven sounds like this language.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe I think an example I could give is I think somebody did it at one point where Dwarven sounded like Russian. And then like elves sounded, you know, very hoity-toity and uppity. Or like very elegant language, I guess you could say. Like I think it was like French or something. But it was just like ways to know this is what those languages are based off of and sound like, so that you have an idea.
There's also just things like if someone is colorblind. Okay. When you're doing your description of a map, they may be able to see the map, but they may not see that something is glowing red. Right? It could just may not see the color red, and so like accurately describing your rooms and stuff like that can definitely help, you know, get people to understand what is happening in the room without maybe being able to see exactly everything that is happening.
Same thing, that can apply to, like, I've never been tested for it, but I do have hearing problems in very specific circumstances. If there is background noise, I am going to struggle to identify who's saying what and be able to like follow along. And if I can't see your lips move, there's a chance I'll hear 20% of what's going on. Which is kind of a big deal in something that relies on spoken communication. So just something like, hey, can you make sure, because I'm struggling to hear your voice, that you sit across from me, for example, or next to me if that's a factor.
I know in like real life, passing things around the table, because I wear glasses, but when I'm usually roleplaying, I take them off, so I'm not wearing my glasses. So if you're telling me, look at this thing, and showing me a picture, It's over there.
Yeah.
I'm like, showing me. I'm sorry. Let me grab my glasses. What was that? Can you hold that up again? How about pass it around so I can see it? Because there's a lot of things where I'm very like, I able to see without my glasses, and I usually don't wear them because they get in the way.
Yeah. Could also be things like just sensory input could be a big thing. I know we have, for example, some of the people in our community who are dealing with having Asperger's, for example, which means that if there's a lot of things going on at the same time, it's very tiring for them to play. And that could be things like avoid having background music for that purpose, or make sure that it's okay if they only look at the Roll20 and aren't engaging with chat because it's a bit overwhelming to take all of that information in at the same time. And similarly, again, from a streaming point of view, we do a lot of theatre of the mind, and that's so that someone who, for whatever reason, can't really always look at the screen should still be able to listen and enjoy the podcast. Like, enjoy the show like a podcast. However, if you have someone who struggles with theatre of the mind, you might want to make sure that there are maps for them, because they have to like see it visually to be able to play efficiently in that scenario. So yeah.
There's one that I know is highly debated with DMs and, on how they do it and whether they're doing it properly, is captioning. There's a lot of captioning programs out there that does not accurately caption enough so that if you post on YouTube and just, in that way some options, they look on YouTube, if you use a software that isn't captioning correctly, it's going to be hard for them to understand what is going on.
Yeah.
I know there are plenty of people in the community that will caption, go through your recording and edit and caption for you accurately. I just know it costs a little bit more. And it's a highly debated one, but in my opinion, it is very appreciated on the back end for those that need it, because if you have a bad captioning software and things start not making sense, most likely they are going to stop watching the show.
Yeah.
And that's not being as inclusive as you can.
And that's also, again, something to take into consideration when you are streaming is what can you do and what's the best way under your circumstances to be able to make things as accessible as possible. And again, that's something that, and that's another thing for captioning software, because I've been looking into, like, what are some things you can have to have live captioning, and that software gets really confused when you're talking about like fantasy type things, and they're like, what's a tiefling?
And
because
there's a lot of things that it can't register.
There's race and class names and
character
names
as
that may not
well.
be right. Like, so your names and your pronoun, like there's some pronouns in there that they won't capture right, or even just descriptions of items that, like, they don't typically add into the captioning software as like a word, because it's like this thing's never used. Like, this is the 1 in 9 million time that it'll be used, but like it
might not be priority number one when you're adding vocabulary.
Banana versus Claymore. Banana's probably gonna win, but
And there's also something to keep in mind with sign language, if you're using that, is that there's not one sign language that is the equivalent of English. Which could be, again, if you're advertising yourself as, we also sign during the podcast, you might want to add which language you're using. Otherwise, it might get real awkward. Like there's a British YouTuber who is deaf, and she's been harassed by Americans who don't understand that she's speaking in one of the British sign languages, and they go, clearly you're just faking being deaf and speaking and being able to sign.
Yeah.
So she actually had to stop and go back to having captions because it was relentless. So maybe specify which language you're using if you do sign during your shows.
Yeah. So BSL, or if it's, from there, one of, like, there are areas that have their own sign slang.
Yeah.
That, you may be using BSL, but it's from this area, and therefore we use in parentheses, this area. That way people can kind of understand where you're coming from on your signs.
What was some other...
It's a tough one.
Yeah. And that's also, I would say, don't be afraid to discuss these things with your players. Like, sometimes there might not be an ideal solution, but there is something that everyone can work with. And yeah, same thing on stream. If there was one way to do it perfectly, we would have found out by now. But no one's discovered it yet. Beyond that, again, like outlining specific table rules or stream rules. Because again, like we have like stream rules that are different from other channels, and every table has their own way of approaching things, and that's going to be things like which software are you using, what location are you playing at, what time of day are you playing, how long are your sessions, because if you've got a 6 to 8 hour session and people aren't allowed to even have a snack, that's a very long time in someone's day. So, yeah, it's one of those, just because you're used to a particular thing doesn't mean that's going to be applicable to everywhere. And if you're a GM and you're streaming on a channel that belongs to someone else, you have to abide by their rules, even though you normally do something else. So figuring out like the frames that you can operate within and explain why they exist can be helpful to do during a session 0 as well. And it could be something like we avoid having online, like discussing things online that are like in-game things, like, oh hey, can you pay for this for me, because I don't have enough gold to buy the specific item. And the reason we're avoiding that is that not everyone has access to Facebook or wherever this conversation is happening. So it can be like, usually there is a reason for it. If you can't think of a reason why you've set a certain table rule, maybe consider why you've got it. It's probably my biggest thing on
when
that.
Banning player handbook stuff. Stop banning player characters from using, any sort of class. Like, if the main classes are there, please don't ban them. I've been in games where they banned 2 classes and it's just like, oh, I can't play wizards or monks. Great. Like, that takes a lot of options out. Please don't do that.
Or if it's,
And
yeah,
give
like,
a reason if you do.
yeah, have reasons for why you do the things you do.
Your reason also is just, it's broken. you're an idiot. Okay? I'm just straight up telling you right now, you're an idiot. So, you know, don't use the "it's broken" card, because all of them have been play tested by hundreds of people.
Yeah.
Actually, hundreds of thousands of people. So I'm not gonna let you go there and say it's broken.
And that's the thing also, be prepared to justify why you're doing something. It doesn't mean that you have to write an essay on it, but if your response is because I'm the GM and I want to, you're being a dick.
Yeah. You're gonna find also that if you are a dick to people, they're not gonna want to come back. So remembering that, don't just give the excuse of, well, I'm the GM, what I say goes. Yeah, but I'm also a person and I can leave.
And
so remember just to be like courteous to people. That's the word I want to use. Courteous to everyone, as well as even for players. Like, there's also players I've played with and demand they want things.
Yeah.
Or like they want more items, they want more like magical items than the other characters, or they want to be the spotlight and center of attention. Again, being courteous, just remember that everyone wants something, but we're all trying to have fun.
It's also perfectly fine to say, just because you found it on Reddit doesn't mean it's an official rule. Like,
exactly.
It's okay to set those types of boundaries, like, absolutely, to say, just because one person ruled it this way doesn't mean that I will. Or that that's going to be a thing at this table.
Well, you're telling me that I can't just go and look up Wizards of the Coast, like, posts and be like, what they mean by it? This is what they meant by it. This is what it's for.
Yeah, like, try to have a balance, like, don't be a dick, but also don't let people be a complete pushover. And try to outline where you fall on that spectrum during session 0. And also be honest during a session 0 about your GMing style. If you are an antagonistic GM, tell people.
Yeah.
If you tell people what they can expect from your GMing
style.
Yeah, from your style. And again, like, talking about the critical role effect, for example, if you don't do voices for your NPCs, that's fine, but a lot of people expect you to, if, like, especially if they're like, my experience is watching things online. So yeah, set out expectations for how you run the game.
Yeah. And even then, voices are not everything. You can voice as many characters as you want, but it's how you tell the story that I would say really matters. Because I don't care if that NPC sounds really cool if the story itself is awful.
Yeah.
Like, you could come up with as many voices as possible and still tell a bad story. So just remembering that it doesn't matter, just do your best at what you can do, and don't worry if you can't come up with 100 million voices for every character.
I'd also say, this is more for streaming purposes, but session 0 is important there too. What do you consider to be the selling point of this game to an audience?
Yeah.
Is it the role-playing? Is it the world building? Is it the combat? Is it, you know, for example, some people really enjoy watching the GM side of things. What are you selling to your audience? If you can't tell your players what they're there for, why should they play in your game? And I think that's crucial, because if you're recruiting, like, really experienced role players and it's going to turn out that you don't actually enjoy acting and improv and prefer, you know, this is how we run it, like, following along a certain path, tell them up front and they'll know. Yeah, so be honest with your GMing style in session 0.
Yep.
Last question for the day. As a GM, are there any questions that you want to be asked during session 0, especially questions that, you know, we haven't covered, or something you don't get asked enough?
I personally think many of all the big subjects have been hit as far as questions to be asked.
Mm.
I like it's just making sure you get as much information out in front of people as possible. So,
Mm.
if you find yourself asking something that you are unsure about, ask it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no harm in asking any question.
Yeah, I'd say that it's ask any question really. Like there are a lot of questions that you would want to be asked. There's also a lot of little things that people just don't think of, so maybe you want to be asked those questions. Like,
Yep.
there's so many like little things that happen in a story that you might not know about that are happening in the background. Let your players know.
Yeah.
Like, they might not know that while we were doing this quest over here, that this quest actually was going on, and everyone over here died because we weren't there to save them.
Yeah.
Like, it's like that. Like, you wouldn't know that the world around you is still continuing. So as GM, you want to be asked these questions of, hey, what's going to be happening in the little picture over the big picture?
And I mean, again, Vault brought up something really good. Like, if there's a chance at having snacks at the table, yeah, take it. Oh yeah, with that, like, maybe check before you put in a lot of effort into snack making that people can actually eat it. Because yeah, it's a bit awkward if they can't. But yeah, snacks are recommended.
Make sure nobody has any
Coffee.
allergies to anything.
Yeah, don't kill someone by like having nuts on the table.
Or in some cases, maybe you did want to kill somebody. Okay, good job. I'm not promoting that. Actually, please don't. Don't actually poison somebody with their food.
This channel does not actually endorse homicide.
Oh my god. In character,
don't try this at home, kids.
In character, feel free to poison all your players.
Out of character, props not.
Please don't. As I am one of your players, please don't.
And or coffee. Coffee is always
yes.
I have children. They need my attention. Okay, I need to take care of them every day. Just don't poison me.
That's actually the last thing that we might want to talk about is like character survival expectations.
Ooh, yeah.
I can't believe we missed that.
That's a good one. The survival rate in the game. Please let me know that beforehand.
Yeah.
Just let all your players know what their survival rate is, if they need to have a backup character just in case.
For example, one of the games that Nia and I are in together, we were pretty much told up front, there's a very high probability that your character will die. Here's 4 backup character sheets.
Yeah.
I vastly prefer that over having to create several different characters without warning, or losing a character that I was heavily invested in.
Yeah.
And it gives you the upfront of exactly how much background do I really want to write for each character. Like, you may have stuff prepped in your head, but you may not want to spend hours typing it out and then lose that one, spend hours typing another one out. It's a good thing to know just ahead of time.
Yeah, especially with like if your players actually also really like the group and the characters they're playing, let them know that, hey, there's a high probability, don't get attached because you could possibly die at any second. And if your character you spent all this time putting so much effort into their story and then they just die like in the first or second session, your players are going to be upset.
Yeah, like it could be something like, I'm not going to kill a PC until they have access to potentially resurrect that person. Or it could be something like, I am never actively going to kill you, but some of your choices might. There will still be consequences for your actions, is something to really bring up with people. Because, especially, sometimes you do have players who need to be taught a lesson that they can't do anything and just get away with it time and time again. That might not inherently mean that I'm gonna kill your character, but oh my god, am I gonna make it hurt? Just be like, there will be consequences for your actions, especially if it's a repeat thing that you do.
Yeah. Like, if you know your players are doing something actively, like, really dumb, just let them know, hey, there's consequences in the world.
Also, are you sure you want to do this? Like, explain what that actually means.
Yeah. I would say, like,
because if you have a completely new player, they might not know that code for that is incredibly dumb. If you choose to do it, you might die.
Yeah.
So,
like, there's a lot of things where, like, players come up with a creative way to maybe do something, except it's also not very creative and it's probably going to result in their death.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that, so it's like, just let them know, hey, are you sure? Are you really sure that might result in death?
There is one more thing we left out that I just remembered, which is a big one. How, at your table, do you differentiate? Now, this may be different between, online versus offline, but how do you differentiate between talking as your character or talking as the player?
Yeah.
If it's a sarcastic remark that has to do with something my character won't know, that's me.
I would say it really depends on the voice that your character has, because if you're friends with a bunch of people, you'll really quickly pick up on when your players are being friends to each other and when they're being their character. Because if you're playing, a noble knight and your character all of a sudden starts being a dick, it's not probably the character. It's probably your friend who's being like, look at you, you're being stupid. Like, there's a serious line between like that, but if you're friends, you probably can pick it up better. If you're not, I would tend to go over the rules of how much you limit out of character's talk, or even just tell people don't talk out of character. Maybe send messages to each other.
I've also seen other good ways of doing this, as far as like when you are speaking at the table. If you're speaking in character, you're normal. If you're speaking out of character as the player, you raise your hand or do something similar to that effect to denote between the two.
Yeah.
It's
also easier if you're, say a person who like has a specific voice for their character. That might be easier to differentiate, because if you play a very high speaking character and then all of a sudden you go back to your normal voice, there's the difference between your characters.
I'd say if I'm saying something in combat, it's usually out of character. If I'm like, where is this? How many things can I fit into a 20-foot radius circle?
It's things that my character is not actively saying, hey, hey guys, how much can I fit in a 20-foot radius?
Yeah.
Like, no, you're not saying that.
I'd also usually say something like question or out of character if I think it might be vague.
Usually that would be a good way also, is where I would say like, hey, out of character really quick, can we, what about this thing? Like, I'll usually reference it being, this is out of character.
It's also, if I address you by your real name, or like you're playing, like not your character's name, but I'm talking to you as a player, and obviously my character doesn't know who the fuck you are. If I'm addressing the character, I'm talking in character too. Most of the time. So that's another way.
Like, I would say like at session 0 probably talk about how are you guys going to talk about it, because if you have, there's plenty of different ways to really do it. You could say, hey, this is out of character, or you could have them say each other's names, your real name compared to your character's name. You could even, like Fox said, have like a certain thing that you do, raise your hand, or like ask a question. Raising your hand might be different because everyone's not looking at the camera all the times, or you might not be using a camera if you're over online, but
or you might be at a physical table and it's a bit ridiculous to sit like
you're holding your hand doing this all day.
Can I please talk now? I mean, I do that sometimes actually, like especially if there's in-character stuff going on and I need to ask a question out of character. That's when I do this, and just like when it's a good moment, get to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So
That's
I've
all
run
I
out
got.
of. Yeah, I'm just gonna say, like, I'm pretty much out of Session Zero stuff
Yeah.
for the moment.
I don't.
So we're gonna chuck a host to someone. Before that, Near and Fox, how about you tell people who you are, what you do, and where people can find you? Near is like, I
Uh,
need reinforcements.
Yep, near is off doing his thing, so I'll get started.
Mhm.
I'm Arcade Fox. A lot of people call me Fox. You can find me at Arcade Fox with a 0 and Fox on Twitter because reasons. You can also find me here on Tavern. I am going to be in a campaign coming up. Still have to come up with my character, and then
Yeah.
you can find me. I'm doing disability rep over at Roll for Fun. I am on shows for Featherfall Tabletop, and honestly, if you would like me in another show because my schedule is not busy enough, message me.
Careful what you wish for, mate. Alright. Nia, what about you?
Hey everyone, I'm Nier, obviously. You can find me on Polish's channel where I do Tavern Talks with her. We sometimes play Overwatch. I'm on a Friday game for my time, Saturday game for Australian time, where we play the campaign The Night Parade. We're a bunch of cultists.
Yeah.
Come join us. It's a lot of fun. I'm also a backup character possibly for another game for Polish's channel. And I think I just got into a one-shot for Featherfall Tabletop community as well, so
Awesome.
we'll be seeing me there as well. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch, everything at the Furret King. So, as you can clearly see by the ferrets I have. So, yeah, that's me.
We're all here for the ferrets.
Yes.
Good, and I'm Polished. If you found a stream, you found my channel. We do a lot of role-playing content, including these weekly tavern talks with a different lineup of guests. Next week, we'll be talking about wizards, so that's going to be pretty exciting. You can find me on the same campaign that Near is in, which is Evil 5th Edition Dungeons and Dragons campaign that we play fortnightly on Saturdays Australian time. In February, we'll be launching our other not so evil D&D campaign as well. Lastly, you can also find me on Roll for Damage, playing investigative journalist Hazel McGrath in our Shadows of Intention Call of Cthulhu game. So we're gonna chuck a host. Again, thanks to everyone who's followed. Thank you, Rosin, for the sub. And yeah, it's been wonderful, everyone. But for now, we're out. Go share the love.